Everyone, Charlie here. Welcome back to One Cup of Japan. This is a show where we have a conversation over something good that soothes you. Today we're just having a cup of green tea because what soothes me is anything that makes my throat feel better. Today we're going to be talking about Kimetsu no Yaiba. 2 days ago here in Japan, the 23rd volume of Kimetsu no Yaiba came out on shelves. We ordered like the version that had like the 4 different action figures, not action figures, small figures included inside of it. And I read it all fairly quickly. I tried to savor it a little bit, but I just couldn't stop kind of thing. And by the time I got to the end, other than like kind of an awkward chapter where like everybody's descendants in the present day are being talked about, I really thought overall it brought the Kimetsu story to a satisfying conclusion. I was really happy with the way things went. I made a video earlier this year where I was talking about all the reasons why I thought Kimetsu no Yaiba was great. And I think at that time, maybe it was right around the time that I had read to about the 7th or 8th volume, which story-wise is just about to where the most recent movie, the only movie I guess, got to story-wise. And now that I've read, 15 more volumes of it, I stand by all the points that I made during that video. There are some other things to say. There are some criticisms, right? There are some shonen manga tropes that sort of the series falls into, and there's a reason why I don't watch shonen manga, don't read shonen manga or watch anime based on shonen that much anymore, because I find it to be mostly kind of like a kind of annoying genre, more than anything. But there are some things that I think not just the shonen manga genre, people writing within that genre could learn, but also people who are writing in comics at large. Just a very brief point I'd like to make is that unlike other manga, especially manga that make it into like Jump, for example, Kimetsu has like a definite end. Demon Slayer, right? As it's, I guess I should have said that before, but it has a definite end, and while that could be undone in the future, the fact that it has a very clear kind of start, midpoint, and sort of climax, to my mind, makes it much more satisfying and also much easier to follow than things like Dragon Ball or One Piece and that kind of thing, where they get to a point where it's just like it's just impossible to get to at one point. Like Dragon Ball just should have finished with the Buu Saga, in my opinion. But anyway, I've been a fan of comics since I was a kid, as the mountain of long boxes that still reside in my parents' house will show. When I was younger, I read a lot of X-Men, but my favorite characters were Spider-Man and Wolverine. I can remember some of my favorite books were like the team-ups that were drawn by Todd McFarlane, I think. I don't really remember the story at this point, but I can remember the art really, really clearly. And so I read that a lot when I was a kid, and then when I went into university, I kind of got into a Batman phase, and then after that I started reading more independent stuff like Black Science and oh god, there's a series that I can see very clearly in my head, but I can't remember the title of. Kind of like it was like an old west kind of comic book thing where the main character was like the daughter of death. I forget exactly what the book was called, but anyway, I really enjoyed it. One thing that held true through all of the sort of periods from my reading it as a child, basically reading comics as a child, to when I moved into high school and college and started reading Batman, and then even when I graduated college and started reading more indie stuff, was the fact that I really liked characters, particularly I really liked villains that had something to them, right? And that's why, even though I sort of got tired of Batman shit like a long time ago, as far as the comics go, Mr. Freeze remains one of my favorite characters to this day, because I think it's what the animated series did with him, where they rewrote his story to make him much more tragic, where he was basically just doing bad stuff to kind of, in hopes of helping his wife, who had like some kind of, I don't remember exactly, but some kind of sickness that she had to be cryogenically frozen until a cure could be found for her disease, kind of thing. And so that's why he was doing all the bad stuff, was to help her, or so that kind of thing. I always thought it was really, those kind of characters are much more interesting, right? Maybe that's one of the reasons why, for example, Darth Vader is also a little bit interesting, is because you could understand the tragedy of him. Now, that being said, I think one of the things that Kimetsu does so well is that it gives the Mr. Freeze treatment to a rather vast array of its villains, right? as opposed to like Dragon Ball, right? Where like, for example, Frieza is just a loudmouth spoiled brat with too much power with a Napoleon complex, right? That kind of thing. It's just, there's not really a lot there to explore. But one of the things that Kimetsu does really, really well is that usually after one of the villains has been defeated, they give you a little bit of backstory. And especially when I got to the end of the last book, I was just like, wow, it's great to know so much about the villains, kind of thing. I think one of the earliest examples that shows that Kimetsu wanted to kind of show the humanity of their villains, despite the fact that they had either through some choice of their own or not, had quite literally become monsters, was with the Hand Demon. I suppose the Hand Demon overall is kind of a minor villain. He makes his first appearance in chapter 6 of the manga, when Tanjiro is basically going through the last test that's necessary for a new demon slayer. If you pass the test, then they kind of can join the corps, that kind of thing. And what's interesting about the Hand Demon is, of course, Tanjiro defeats him, but as he's sort of like, as his body is sort of like disincorporating, right? We see like this flashback scene where we're introduced to his like older brother, who he had always asked to hold his hand because he was always afraid of so many different things. And his older brother would chide him a little bit and say, oh, why are you so scared all the time, that kind of thing. But he would still hold his hand. And the tragedy of this is that after this Hand Demon first became a demon, the first person that he ate was his older brother, who was always sort of there for him and supporting him. And now this character, this villain, right, has to live with the guilt of basically betraying someone who was always supportive of him, and he has to live with it through eternity, right? Because demons don't die unless their head is cut off, basically. And so you can kind of understand the tragedy of this character and why maybe he became so bad when he just had to live with it for years and years and years, and I think you can really understand that kind of thing. Luckily, as we get towards the end of the series, we don't have to just get backstories for sort of the more disgusting villains. Probably within the last like 5 volumes or so of the anthologized manga, we're introduced to a character by the name of Kokushibo, and he's like the top ranked. He's the number 1 within the 12 Kizuki, right? These are like the underlings of Muzan, the main villain. And his story too, like after you're kind of told the bigger picture, I think it's really hard not to kind of understand at least a little bit where he's coming from, you know? When we're first introduced to him, he sort of has like this Majin Vegeta kind of vibe where like he kind of sold his soul to the devil, literally, for a power boost because he just doesn't want to be second best. He doesn't want to play second fiddle to anybody. And in some ways, that's basically the story of Kokushibo. However, when we hear about his relationship with his older brother, Yoriichi, right, that's when we start to see like some of the motivations that sort of drove him to accept the offer of becoming a demon and basically becoming a tool for this horrible character in Muzan, right? Do you have any siblings? I have 2. I have an older brother, who's 2 years older than I am, and I have a younger brother who's 10 years younger than I am. My older brother is just this incredibly successful person, right? He worked at like the leading technology company in the world straight out of college. He went to an excellent school. He founded his own company and now he's a lawyer. And that wasn't handed to him. He did all of those things on his own steam, right? And of his own, basically because of his own will, And then my younger brother is a product designer. And he's also started his own venture kind of thing. And I'm going to be starting my own thing here pretty quick, but it's difficult to put into words, kind of, I think, like the envy, but also it's this mix of envy and pride that comes with somebody being somebody's brother. Particularly, I think if it's for example, I'm a younger brother and I have an older brother, but it's also the same if you have like a younger brother, because you think like, okay, well, I've got to set some standard for my younger brother, that kind of thing. So there's a lot of those kind of feelings too. And reading into Yoriichi's story, into Kokushibo's story with Yoriichi, where like Kokushibo had like this dream to be the world's best swordsman and like be this great warrior and that kind of thing. And he worked pretty hard for it, you know? And then his younger brother, younger only by like a little bit, I think they're twins, but still younger, has like this just natural ability, and he also works quite hard. So it's this combination of natural talent mixed with this ability, and just no matter what Kokushibo does, he's always surpassed by his younger brother. And so it feeds into like this envy and this rage and all this kind of thing, until he's sort of presented with a choice, right? Like, what do I do? Can I finally become better than my younger brother if I quite literally sell myself to the devil of this universe, kind of thing, right? And I think what's even more tragic is that even after he does this, right, spoilers, even after he agrees to become a demon and become like, you know, the number one guy, well, he probably didn't become number one right away, but become, you know, one of Muzan's henchmen, effectively. Even after he gets this power boost, he is still almost killed by his younger brother, and when it comes down to it, because his younger brother is a member of the Demon Slayer Corps. And his younger brother's like, I can't let this stand, like, he's become an abomination, of course I have to kill him, kind of thing. And the younger brother delivers like a near fatal blow, and then he dies from old age during the duel, kind of thing, right? And it's like you know, so the only reason Kokushibo survives is because his older brother was just so old, and just time caught up with him, right? And of course that's not something that Kokushibo ever has to worry about as a demon, is time. But I think also what this really shows is, well, for example, well, none of the demons ever have to worry about time in the sense of it killing them. But I think, as we saw also with the hand demon and also with Kokushibo, who we're talking about now, like, time becomes a different kind of enemy, because it just sort of it gives you the ability, I guess is one way to say it, for better or for worse, to just sort of like live within your regret, or live within like your successor, or whatever the case may be, forever, right? And so in Kokushibo's case, he just sort of has to live with knowing that he was always going to be number two if he never made this deal. And even when he did make the deal, even when he gave everything up and literally became everything that was like the opposite of what he kind of wanted to be, he still couldn't be better, right? And so imagine that chip on your shoulder, but for like centuries, right? And imagine the rage and hate that builds up. And so of course you just like, yeah, I'm just gonna be like the number one dude who listens to the more number one dude and just kills a bunch of people and eats them and whatever, you know? So because of this, it's just like Kokushibo's story can't help but be super relatable to me. Just as somebody with brothers, and knowing what it feels like to have like a mix of incredible pride and maybe not so strong envy, but it's there for sure. Anyhow, these are just some thoughts that I had. I reached the end of volume 23, and I let out that kind of like bittersweet sigh, that like, oh man, I just read and finished a story that was really good, that made me feel something, made me think about something, kind of sigh. And I think from that point I started to think, I guess I remembered like back to when Avengers, I guess it would have been Endgame, came out. And I think around that time, or maybe a little bit before that, there had been like a bunch of articles coming out about how the MCU, for example, has like a villain problem. And basically the warranted criticisms were that the villains in that universe are really kind of two-dimensional, right? They have like a lot of these motivations that we talked about before, like, right, the Frieza motivation, which is just like, I just want to be number one, I just want to be the dude, I want to rule over everything, right? That kind of thing. Or I want some mystical artifact so that I can enforce my will on people, and all that kind of thing, right? Thanos, to some extent, I think was a little bit deeper, because you could understand a little bit. They told you a little bit about his motivation, but then when you realize like the dude just could have been like, okay, well, I wish for like infinite resources in the universe, then his whole plan kind of falls away. So that kind of takes away your ability to kind of connect with him at all, I think. And so yeah, after reading through Kimetsu, finishing it, I thought like, okay, well, really we should expect more, right? It's not enough just to have a good a good hero, right? Or a good trio or a good team of heroes, whatever the case may be. So my feeling, my hope really is that maybe the success of Kimetsu is, right, like the number one grossing like manga of the year, like the Kimetsu movie is just incredibly successful. It's kind of crazy how successful it is. Like, I've gone to see it twice, my partner's gone to see it 3 times, people in our family have gone to see it at least 2 or 3 times, and that's just within like our circle. My hope is that the success of all this will kind of inspire kind of other series within this genre, and hopefully beyond it, just to be something more than just these like complete power fantasies of like, you know, power fantasies of little boys and villains that don't really have any meat to them kind of thing, is my hope. So here's hoping there's more like Kimetsu on the way. So anyway guys, I hope you enjoyed this most recent deep roast here on the One Cuppa channel. It's of course very, very different from the last one that we did, but I wanted to do something different and a little bit less number based than the one we did previously, so I hope you enjoyed it. What do you think about this series? Have you watched all the anime or seen the movie? Have you read all the manga, the manga? And what are your thoughts about it? Please let me know down in the comments below. Thanks always for watching. I love your faces, and I'll see you all very soon indeed. Cheers.